Mike from Metro Trails here. Some more history. We are in Hunterdon County's Tower Hill Reserve along the route of the Highlands Trail, which I always used to use this spot over here, but the path is no longer maintained, unfortunately. That comes out of the woods just up the road. But this site was a historic farmstead. Just to the right of the old spring house here was a beautiful old farmhouse built in 1841 by a guy named Conrad Wayne. And he farmed all the property through here and across the street. All this is now county park land. And this one here is a particularly sad one for me. So I don't have really a whole lot to add about the original owner, but in about 1932, the property was purchased for Frederick Devenald. Now, Devenald was a bookkeeper of sorts for Thomas Edison. And he had this as sort of like a summer retreat type of property to use in his later years. And it was actually pretty close to Edison's facility over in New Village, his concrete plant. We're on top of the Musconetcong Mountain Formation right now. So just over the hill over here, and getting out into Warren County a bit, was where Edison's cement plant was. So the house used to stand right over here. And it stayed in the Devenald family for a while, and then it was sold to Hunterdon County in the 80s. The house served as residence for many years, and then there were plans to turn it into some sort of offices for one of the county departments, and a whole lot of work went into it. But with new windows and such. But then it was decided they were going to rip it down, and I was personally told because it was no longer historic, because it had two additions added to it in 1890 and 1910. Well, I was told this in 2010, so my response was, so 100 years ago and 110 years ago, it had an addition that makes it no longer historic. But I thought maybe it might get saved. But then it was torn down in 2013 anyway. So house used to stand over here. When you're heading out into a spot that used to have a house, there's always a few clues that you'll find of it. Like over here, we see a couple of blue spruce trees, which they don't propagate in the wild, really. They were planted. And then a very common one is the Norway spruce you see over here. So when I'm walking through the woods and trying to find where a house used to be, I'll look for Norway spruces in particular. So this area used to get brush hogged, and it's been unfortunately let go a lot. One thing we did get to save is the spring house, which is a very rare example of a two-story spring house. You don't normally see those, so that's pretty neat. The Highlands Trail route, which goes right through here, the original route being 170 miles from the Delaware River to the Hudson River, actually passes a couple of these rare spring houses. The other one can be found at the north side of the Deer Path Sanctuary, several miles to the west of here. All of these fields were also in cultivation until somewhat recently, but the problem is they grow over so badly with these woody invasive materials. The sort of silvery looking ones are autumn olive or Russian olive, which are considered to be the subspecies of the same species, but they'll grow several feet in a year, and they get to the point where you can't brush hog them down. So this field is already kind of considered lost, taken out of cultivation. But the Highlands Trail follows along the road, then goes into the woods over here, and then cuts over into the Rohrig tract before making its way to Jugtown Mountain. One of the things that I thought could have possibly happened differently was that when a piece of property is chiseled away from parkland, there's some sort of stipulation that they purchase another piece of land that is contiguous with it. And when the Roerich tract was purchased, I felt that they could have chiseled away the original Tower Hill house and sold it off to private interests to at least protect the building. But that didn't happen either. So that's one of the problems with government. It's not all their fault either. Most government agencies are about 26% the staffing that they had 35 years ago and can't maintain these places. So when you see a building and you think because it's on a piece of preserved land that the building is then preserved, it doesn't matter. The National Register of Historic Places doesn't matter. It can still be torn down just as easily. All the National Register means that it's an acknowledgement that it's old, and it means it's eligible for grant money. That's all. It doesn't give it protections. So I would really love to see more of these buildings, not just here, but in, for example, Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area. Chisel off those pieces of properties, sell them to private interests, and then use some of that money to help maintain the rest of the properties, because we're losing so much all the time. So there's some history of Tower Hill Reserve and its connection to Thomas Edison. One more thing, Devenald's wife Julia was also the voice of the world's first talking doll. She might have been the only woman actually ever employed by Thomas Edison. So she also was up here. So there's some great history here that just was allowed to disappear, and that's sad. But time marches on, and I think we need to start thinking outside the box, because past practice hasn't worked. And the greenest building is the one that exists. And we want to try to curb development, and yes, this whole building went into a dumpster. And that's just not right. We could do better, and I hope we do in the future. That's all. Thanks.